This is ABC News Nightline. Reporting from Washington, Ted Koppel.
Good evening. The disease has already claimed more victims than Legionnaire's disease and toxic shock syndrome combined. And yet, still, surprisingly few people are familiar with the Acquired Immune Deficiency Syndrome, or the acronym by which it's frequently identified, AIDS.
A mystery disease known as the gay plague has become an epidemic unprecedented in the history of American medicine. Topping the list of likely victims are male homosexuals who have many partners and drug users who inject themselves with needles.
1 out of every 2 gay men in the city is estimated now to be infected with the AIDS virus.
Of 70,000 men?
35,000 are probably infected. The mortality for the disease is close to 100%. Ultimately, within 3 years, most patients die.
We're all scared to death. We'd like to know what the hell we're supposed to do here. You know, what should we do? Should we stay home and lock ourselves back in the closet? Or, what should we do?
More than 100 people were arrested during a protest. Demonstrators were demanding more money in the war against AIDS.
The U.S. government is abandoning people with AIDS.
Experts worry that fear has replaced understanding of AIDS victims. They cite a proposition here in California that would, if passed in November, quarantine AIDS patients.
We all lived in fear, and we all watched our friends die. AIDS is a wasting disease. The person just gets smaller and smaller and emaciated, and it's hard to watch that. People were dying of AIDS, and there was no place for them to go. In Winston-Salem, there were wealthy white families whose gay sons, they were coming home to die. And their parents didn't really have a way to take care of them. And that is why there was a need for ASOs, AIDS Service Organizations. AIDS Care Service, they entered to fill that void so that we could provide a full range of services for anyone living with AIDS. I was on the board of AIDS Care Service starting in the early 90s, and later on I became a staff member, and then I went back to be a board member after that. Our goal really was to build what we called at the time an end-stage facility. It was very much a hospice for people in the end stages of AIDS. And at the time, hospice would not take people who were dying of AIDS. It was fear. It was fear. They didn't know how transmissible it was. They were afraid that other people would not put a family member there. So that's what we wanted to do. But you can't build an end-stage facility the first year of your existence. So we kind of changed our focus and started working with a case manager who would help people who were not at the end stage but needed housing. A lot of people were kicked out of their own home when their family found out that they were HIV positive.
When I started nursing here at Baptist, I had been hearing about this thing on the West Coast in New York that supposedly was impacting gay men, and you would see pictures of emaciated men on their deathbeds dying. And there was still a lot of prejudice, fear. Nurses oftentimes refused to care for a person that was diagnosed and known to be dying. Those persons were isolated, scared, with no one. And I didn't ever refuse. Often, especially if it was right there at time, take off my mask so that they could see my face, so they could see a smile, so they could see a tear. And I would take off my glove so that they could feel a human hand touching them. Because the thing that I always want people to remember that I always wanted to do as a nurse is treat people the way that I want to be treated, that way I want my family to be treated. And I believe, and I hope and I pray that I always succeeded at doing that. I had been feeling ill, I had lost weight, and I made an appointment with Downtown Health Plaza. They did everything appropriate, and I knew the steps for them to go through, being a retired RN. And eventually the doctor came in, he said, everything has come up negative. He put his hand on my left knee, and he looked me straight in the eyes, and he said, I think that we need to do a test. And so I agreed to have an HIV test done. I became positive at 48. I immediately called the man. He wouldn't even come to the phone. He denied ever having sex with me, etc., etc. I felt like I was a leaf in a tornado. At my diagnosis in 2002, I became aware of AIDS Care Service. I didn't come into their care until 2009, when I was one night away from becoming homeless. And they came and they scooped me up and nestled me into an apartment there at the Horseshoe.
Then we realized that these people were living alone. They needed a social network. They needed something to do. So we created a day program. They would play games, they would rent a movie, they would make pizza, but they had each other, and they had the AIDS Care Service staff.
So there was something to do 3 to 4 times a week at AIDS Care Service. And yeah, it was very healing.
One person that I knew for years was Reggie. He was lovable, and everybody who knew him loved him. He had an older brother or an older sister that he lived with, and periodically would get kicked out. And when he got kicked out, we had his back. And he was one of the people who passed. And I think that he was probably the person that meant the most to me. We determined every single day that there was a new need. And in any way we could, we helped these folks get what they needed. Sometimes it was overwhelming for us. Sometimes we were in over our head.
But if not for AIDS Care Service, I would have been lost. 100% completely lost. And nobody deserves that. Dear friends,
your life made a difference. Whether you're gone, whether you're still here, whether you were there for 30 minutes, whether you were there for 10 years.
Each and every one of you, the ones that came before me, to the ones that were there while I was there, to the ones that were there after I graduated.
You made some kind of a contribution to this organization or to someone.
I love you. I wish with every ounce of my being, and trust me, that's a lot of ounces, I wish you were still here. Thank you.